A Schoolgirl's Diary, Part 2, paragraphs 25 to 53. After the 15th of January, no girl, either big or little, shall go to school. Otherwise, you know what we can do, and the parents and the school principal will be responsible. That was the news that came over the radio Mala in late December 2008. At first, I thought it was just one of his crazy pronouncements. It was the 21st century. How could one man stop more than 50,000 girls from going to school? I am a hopeful person. My friends may say too hopeful, maybe even a little crazy, but I simply did not believe that this man could stop us. School was our right. We debated his etiquette in class, his edict in class. Who will stop him? The other girl said. The Taliban have already blown up hundreds of schools, and no one has done anything. We will, I said. We will call on our government to come and end this madness. The government? One girl said. The government can't even shut down Fulza's radio station. The debate went round and round. I didn't give in. But even to me, my argument sounded a bit thin. One by one, girls stopped coming to school. Their fathers forbade them. Their brothers forbade them. Within days, we had gone from 27 girls in our grade to 10. I was sad and frustrated, but I also understood in all cultures, girls do not defy the males in their families. And I realized that the father and brothers and uncles who many made my friends stayed home were doing so out of concern for their safety. It was hard not to feel a bit depressed sometimes, not to feel as though the families who kept their girls at home were simply surrendering to Fazal. But whenever I'd catch myself giving in to a feeling of defeat, I'd have one of my talks with God. Help us appreciate the school days that are left to us, God, and give us the courage to find even harder for me. School had been due to end the first week of January for our usual winter break, so my father decided to postpone the holiday. We would remain in class through the 14th January. That way, we could squeeze every minute left to us, and the 10 remaining girls in my class lingered in the courtyard every day after school in case there was our last chance to be together. At home in the evening, I wondered what I would do with my life if I couldn't go to school. One of the girls at school had gotten married off before Falazuz's edict. She was 12. I knew my parents wouldn't do that to me, but I wondered, what would I do? Spend the rest of my life indoors out of sight with no TV to watch, no book to read? How would I complete my studies and become a doctor, which is what my great hope at the time? I played in my shoe I played with my shoebox dolls and thought the Taliban won't want to turn the girls of Pakistan into identical lifeless dolls. While we girls savor the days until January 15th, Fauza struck again and again. The previous year had been hard, but the days of January 2009 were among the darkest of our lives. Every morning, someone arrived at school with a story about another killing, sometimes two, sometimes three a night. Fauza men killed a woman in Mangor because they said she was doing fashi or being indecent because she was a dancer. And they killed a man in the valley because he refused to wear his pants short the way the Taliban did. And now we're forbidden from going to school. One afternoon, I heard my father on the phone. All the teachers have refused, he said. They are too afraid, but I will see what I can do. He hung up and rushed out of the house. A friend who worked at the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation network, had asked him to find someone from the school to write a diary about life under the Taliban for its Urdu website, a teacher or an older student. All the teachers had said no. My but Miriam's younger sister, Asha, one of the older girls, had agreed. The next day, we had a visitor, Asha's father. He would not allow his daughter to tell her story. It's too risky, he said. My father didn't argue with him. The Taliban were cruel, but even they wouldn't hurt a child. He wanted to say, but he respected Asha's father's decision and prepared to call the BBC with the bad news. I was only 11, but I said, why not me? I knew he wanted someone older, not a child. I looked at my father's hopeful, nervous face. He had been so brave for speaking out. It was one thing to talk to national and local media, but this diary might be read by people outside Pakistan. It was the BBC, after all. My father had always stood by me. Could I stand by him? I knew without even thinking that I could. I would do anything to be able to continue to go to school. But first, we went to my mother. If she was afraid, I wouldn't do it. Because if I didn't have her support, it wouldn't be like speaking with only half my heart. But my mother agreed. She gave us her answer with a verse from the Holy Quran. Falsehood has to die, she said, and truth has to come forward. God would protect me, she said, because my mission was a good one. Many people in SWAT saw danger everywhere. They looked, but our family didn't look at life that way. We saw possibilities, and we felt a responsibility to stand up for our homeland. My father and I are the starry-eyed ones. Things have to get better, we always say. My mother is our rock. While our heads are in the sky, her feet are on the ground. But we all believed in hope. Speaking up is the only way things will get better, she said. I had never written a diary before and didn't know how to begin. So the BBC correspondent said he would help me. He had to call me on my mother's phone because even though we had a computer, there were frequent power cuts and few places in Montenegro where internet access. The first time he called, he told me he was using his wife's phone because his own phone had been bugged by the intelligence services. He suggested that I use a fake name so the Taliban wouldn't know who was writing the diary. I didn't want to change my name, but he was worried about my safety. This was my choice, a pseudonym for me, Gal Maka, which means cornflower, and is the name of a heroine in a Pashtun folk tale. My first diary entry appeared on the 3rd of January, 2009, about 2 weeks before Fazlul's deadline, and the title was, I Am Afraid. I wrote about how hard it was to study or to sleep at night with the constant sounds of fighting in the hills outside town. And I described how I walked to school each morning, looking over my shoulder for fear I'd see a Taliban following me. I was writing from the privacy of my bedroom, using a secret identity, but thanks to the internet, the story of what was happening in SWAT was there for the whole world to see. It was as if God had a long-lasting grant, my wish for a magical pencil. In the next entry, I wrote about how school was the center of my life and about how proud I was to walk the streets of Mangra in my school uniform. As exciting as it was to be Gal Macha in this hard to tell anyone, especially at school, the diary was anonymous. Pakistani schoolgirl was all anyone talked about. One girl even printed it out and showed it to my father. "It's very good," he said, and with a knowing smile.